married,
Richard
younger.
Lionheart had an 11-year-old wife.
Yeah.
But we don't think Richard Lionheart's perfect. We don't want to build this whole country based on what Richard Lionheart lived his life as, whereas you want this country to be on what Muhammad lived, yeah?
Me, like I said, I'm still new in it. I'm still new to Islam, like, so...
My point was that this shop has been opened by my council to convert everyone to Islam. And unfortunately, look, you've got a revert here. You'd call yourself a revert. I'd say a convert who doesn't actually know anything about...
Here's what transpired when Tommy traveled down to his hometown in Luton to educate this ignorant man in his 30s who just converted to Islam without knowing what he was getting himself into.
I'm still doing it.
Okay, so if you're new, I'm not here to...
Yeah, sorry, I guess
my problem, so not to put you in an awkward position, yeah, because my problem is that verse talks about divorcing prepubescent children. That's what that verse is about, yeah? So, Muhammad married Aisha when she was how old?
That we do not know fully yet.
We know from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, the two of the leading world hadiths. So, how old was Muhammad then when he married Aisha? How old was Aisha?
As he is being questioned, it is apparent the new convert is totally ignorant of what he's pledging his allegiance to.
I was probably about between 9 and 11, I would say.
No, she was 6. So Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim are two of the most recognised. The problem is, it's great if you think she was older. That's still a bit strange at 9, 11. But it's great if you think she was a lot older. But the problem is Sahih Bukhari, which means authentic. There's 5 leading authentic hadiths, and they state that she was 6 years old, and he raped her when she was 9. They'll say marriage. Yeah?
Got it. Would you date an 11-year-old?
No, obviously not.
So do you believe Muhammad was perfect?
Yeah.
But Muhammad, you just said married an 11-year-old.
Because things were different back those days, they weren't.
So he wasn't perfect in this modern time.
But if you look back in the history, like even King...
This special meeting happened shortly before his incarceration, where Tommy hosted media personality Tyler Aloe Vera in his hometown of Luton, to show him how the Islamization of the area has destroyed it.
Married,
Richard
younger.
Lionheart had an 11-year-old wife.
Yeah.
But we don't think Richard Lionheart's perfect. We don't want to build this whole country based on what Richard Lionheart lived his life as, whereas you want this country to be on what Muhammad lived, yeah?
Me, like I said, I'm still new in it. I'm still new to Islam, like, so...
My point was that this shop has been opened by my council to convert everyone to Islam. And unfortunately, look, you've got a revert here. You'd call yourself a revert. I'd say a convert who doesn't actually know anything about...
There's a very specific moment in open confrontations like this when a false sense of confidence turns into a dangerous hesitation. And here's a recent with Tommy that captures that exact moment almost frame by frame, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.
For more on this, let's bring in our guests today. Joining us on Skype from Basel is Bilgin Ayata, Professor of Political Sociology at the University of Basel. Bilgin specialises on social movements and conflict. In London, Tommy Robinson, Coordinator of Pegida UK. Tommy's also the author of the book Enemy of the State. Also joining us from The Hague, Alexander Spoor, filmmaker and creator of the social media video, The Holy Quran Experiment. Welcome.
The imbalance becomes clearer immediately after the panel is introduced. You can see a political sociologist, a filmmaker, and Tommy Robinson. He isn't introduced as a commentator. He's introduced as a disruptor. And the first question confirms it.
Tommy, what's wrong with Islam today?
Make no mistakes, that's not a neutral question. It's an accusation disguised as curiosity.
What's wrong with Islam today? You could look to any country in the world and pick any number of the things that Muslims are doing in the name of Islam. There's an entire state being created in the Middle East, which is propagating murder, rape, enslavement of non-Muslims. That's it, anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. There's a hell of a lot wrong with Islam today. Well, it's not just today, there's a hell of a lot wrong with Islam for the last 1400 years.
Are you anti-Islam and or anti-migrant?
I'm not anti-immigration, no. I'm also not anti-Muslim. I have a problem with the ideology of Islam because it propagates and incites hatred against me. It has a view of me as a non-Muslim, as a kafar, and I will speak out against it.
Robinson doesn't dodge it or try to soften it either. He speaks in terms of ideology, history, and patterns. Whether you agree or not, notice how he avoids individual blame. That alone unsettles the room. Institutions can be debated. Ideologies can be challenged. Individuals invite sympathy. He chose the hardest target.
To you, Bilgin, that kind of rhetoric, does that make the situation in Europe better or worse? Because it occurs to me that what Tommy is doing is making the situation in Europe a lot more combustible than it has to be.
Well, absolutely. I think the interesting aspect of this Islamization discourse that right-wing populist movements right now are carrying forward in Europe is actually making the secular societies in Europe much more focused on religion than actually they should be as secular societies, right? So this kind of generalization that we just heard is a rhetoric that is now becoming rather possible to say in political discourse. But I think really we should not forget that after all, Europe and European countries are have secular orders where these kind of generalizations on religion just have no place, should not have place.
Notice how the sociologist stepped in, invoking secularism into the discussion. But here's the contradiction: religion isn't dominating the conversation. It's being defended from examination. That point never gets addressed. Instead, the conversation keeps moving.
Sander in The Hague, when you're out and about making your videos on YouTube, do you get a sense that makes you understand why organisations such as Pegida get traction with particularly, say, the younger generation in Europe who live in deprived, less well-off areas?
I guess there's a certain understanding there where I speak to a lot of different people that have a lot of different opinions. And a lot of people are fearful for what the Islamization, if you will, of the West will do for their safety. I also believe that, on the other hand, there are a lot of people that are also scared but more willing to inform themselves. And informing yourself sometimes also results in being fearful. But some people, they look at it from another angle. Also from my
At this point, the filmmaker tries to lower the temperature. And this is the moment where things could have stabilized. But Robinson doesn't argue about tones. He argues about substance. And here's the moment he asks where anyone stands on those issues.
Age range and my generation, where there's really no point in being divided on how we should treat each other. I think that if we listen, or at least I feel like a lot of people feel like if we listen to each other, if we have a civilized discussion about how we feel as opposed to what is right and wrong, a lot of people are willing to have that discussion. So I'm optimistic.
Tommy, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I'm not optimistic. I'd like to ask that lady what I've said that's factually incorrect, or if she's in support of punishment for apostasy, if she's in support of death for homosexuals, if she's in support of punishment for adultery. What is it that I oppose that she stands up for? I'd like to know what it is she stands up for, because or what I've said that's factually incorrect. Because she may not like hearing the truth, but the truth is still the truth.
Who's trying to introduce the death penalty for homosexuals in Germany or in the UK? Who's doing that?
Pardon, what did you say?
Who's advocating?
This is where discomfort creeps in. Because these aren't emotional claims. They're legal realities in parts of the world. The response is to minimize. Is this happening here? Is it formal? Is it legal? And Robinson responds by pointing out something crucial.
Right now, is there a movement that you see in the UK or in Germany that is trying to implement Sharia law, let's say, is trying to advocate for death penalty against homosexuals? Is there something like that happening? What is Islamization?
Yes. Yes, there is Islamization. In the UK, we have 85 operating Sharia law courts. 85. So yes, there is. There are many Muslims calling for Sharia across Europe.
Tommy, just to interrupt you for a second, correct me if I'm wrong here. I've spent the past 3 months...
Can you see what's happening? One side keeps shrinking definitions. The other keeps widening consequences. Notice how the host insists they aren't legally binding, while Robinson insists they are culturally binding. And that difference matters.
In Doha. Before that, I lived and worked in London for a quarter of a century and up and down the UK. I have never, ever, ever seen Sharia law being applied by a legally constituted British court. That has never, ever happened.
Does it matter if it's a legally constituted British court? We have 85 Sharia court tribunals which are operating within our country, which are making decisions such as when a child gets to the age of 7, he's taken away from the custody of the mother and given to the father. The women are inheriting 50% less than the men. We have Sharia tribunals in our country. And when you're talking about what's going on across Europe, on New Year's Eve we had over 800 women who were sexually abused and assaulted in just one city. We've had people murdered and butchered by refugees in Paris. This lady says that the Pegida and groups like that are a danger to democracy. What democracy? No one's voted or asked if we want barbarians to come through our borders. No one's asked us. No one's asked the people of Europe. If you ask the people of Europe, they'll tell you quite frankly.
Now the discussion turns to violence. And instantly the accusation flips. It's not the acts that threaten democracy, it's the rhetoric around them. This is where many viewers start to feel the disconnect. And where outcomes are being overshadowed by tone.
Our country who wish to bring their backward way of life or their culture or their intolerance with them. And that's the reality of where we're at in Europe.
I'm sorry, I'd like to step in there. You're sort of generalizing the people of Europe as if every individual in Europe is against the income of Islamic immigrants. I mean, of course,
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said if you put it to a vote. I said if you put it to a vote, people would vote against bringing in 1.5 million Muslim young fighting-age men into the country of Germany. If you put it to a vote now in the UK, the majority of people are opposed to open border policy. The majority.
Tommy, just allow Alexander to finish his point. Carry on, Alexander.
Well, no, I'm interested in that because I don't have that statistic. So I'm not sure whether or not that is true. You might be right. On the other hand, I know that across Europe, I don't think this will be the sentiment everywhere. And, as much as I understand...
Robinson's introduction of consent lands harder than expected. Because democracy is easy to invoke until someone asks who agreed. Then comes the pivotal moment, where the host begins reading violent passages. He frames them as Quranic. His intention here is clear.
Fair. That these so-called, or in your words, barbarians are entering Europe. It's that's sort of a generalization of all Muslims, because even if you're talking about a few individuals, that are trespassing our laws, that are violating our European laws, then we have courts in place to make sure that those people see a proper trial and
guys,
go to court.
I just want to move the debate on to broaden it out a little bit. Bilgin, bring us some sense and logic on this. Do you, through your research and your writing, understand the debate in cities like Calais, cities like Birmingham, cities like Dresden, where people maybe do feel a little bit like there's a Trojan horse coming through the door, but they, of course, they're not anti-Islamic, they're not racist, they're not anti-Muslim, but they do have an issue with seeing their...
This is the attempted trap. Watch their attempt at tricking Robinson by reading passages from the Old Testament and trying to pass them off as verses from the Quran. Robinson spotted their hypocrisy immediately. And this is where you notice something strange, not in volume, but in posture. The certainty on the other side starts to wobble.
In their perception, in their minds, very, very quickly.
Let me speak for Germany. The city that you mentioned, Dresden, where the Pegida demonstrations are taking place and where the movement emerged, the number of the Muslim population is less than 1%. Right. So obviously there are sentiments within the population there that is very much picking up, not on the day-to-day experiences. They cannot have them with less than 1% of the population, but they are responding to political discourse and to media, of course. We have to see that. Especially after September 11, but also already before that, the discussion on immigrants changed in Europe, where religion became the key marker, where immigrants were mostly becoming presented as Muslims instead of immigrants. And if you look at how over time the political discussion, way before the right-wing populist movement had this kind of increasing strength that it has now, the media and politics were already targeting, often criminalizing, and putting immigrants into a negative light. So why does someone in Dresden who has very little encounter, right, with immigrants or with people with a Muslim background, goes to a demonstration like.
Robinson doesn't stay on the trick. He pivots to enforcement. His question is really potent. He asks whether someone in Qatar can openly criticize Muhammad, whether leaving Islam is punished. And suddenly, theory collapses into geography.
Point, Tommy, but I just want to put one quite fulsome point to you, if I may. I'm sitting here in a studio in Doha. We are in Qatar. We are arguably in the heart of the Middle East. Therefore, we are in the heart of Islam. Let me just read something to you from the Holy Book, and I want you to react to that, okay? And you can't see me, but I've got a copy of the Quran in front of me. There are parts of a Holy Book that talk about people being persecuted and killed. There are parts of a Holy Book that talk about people all over the world being killed because you are my followers. Another quote from one of the Holy Books in this part of the world talks about people being stoned to death with stones until they die. Another part of a holy book that one can read in this part of the world talks about utterly destroying your enemies, spare them not, but slay both man and woman. When you hear those quotes, what do you think that speaks to?
I'd ask you why you're reading the Old Testament to me.
This is where the rant begins. Arab funding, blood money, exported radicalization. And regardless of where you stand, the structure of the conversation breaks here.
You've had that before, haven't you?
Simple question.
So,
no, it's a simple question. I'm not stupid. You're sitting quoting verses from the Old Testament, thinking that I'm a moron that would think that's from the Quran. I know the Old Testament and I know the Quran. Can I ask you a question? Have you read the Quran?
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
Yeah? So
in English, not in Arabic, but in English.
In English. Are you free, sitting where you are in Doha, to criticise the Prophet Muhammad? Are you free to do that?
Yes, I am. I have had intelligent conversations with my Islamic colleagues on the very same subject.
Can someone in Qatar leave Islam?
Yes.
Is apostasy punishable?
You don't have to be Islamic to be in Qatar. You can leave the country, you can come into the country if you are Jewish.
A Muslim cannot leave Islam. Is punishable in Qatar. The country that you're talking to me from, the country whose tower I'm sitting in, the country that funds radicalisation worldwide, the country that supports Hamas, and you're sitting there trying to take some moral high ground about issues in the world that relate to Islamic extremism, when the country and the people who are paying your wage are propagating that extremism worldwide. I've come into this building and just had to go through an airport-style scanner, and when I asked why, they said because of the Paris attacks.
Tommy, I do have to move the debate on because I do have to move the debate on. Yes, of course I do. Because otherwise you and I will end up having...
what you're hearing.
No, that's not true, sir. Otherwise you and I will have to have... You and I will have to have a conversation down the pub the next time I'm back in London. Alexander, coming back to you, the imagery here surely is very strong, because when you see tear gas being used, when you see Molotov cocktails being used, what does that leave as a lingering aftertaste?
Look, we're talking about we're talking about something that is currently an emotional issue, something that we'll be having a different discussion about in a week from now, something that we'll get context to in the coming days. So, you know, of course, emotionally, that's...
By the end of the day, Tommy had thoroughly shut their mouths in ways they never expected. Kindly share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Thanks for watching.